to people like that message, and the consequences is it sends a message that the most powerful country in the world agrees with what they do, which is very bad for all the people who are trying to achieve human rights in those places. And also, if we are supposed to be looking out for national interests, and presumably we have a national interest in people being able to look at us with some degree of trust and actually seeing that we stand for something worthwhile. But if we keep backing up oppressors, how are people supposed to see?
Exactly. How can we, Anthony Blinken, yeah. Anthony Blinken, who is currently Secretary of State under Biden, said something to the effect that, we're now back as global actors. We're now back as actors on the world stage. We now have an international presence again, and we're now going to stand for human rights, but we cannot consistently stand for human rights if we don't address the history of human rights abuses in our own country. Most notably, if we don't keep working to dismantle systemic racism in this country, and if we don't have a consistent record on who we support in other countries, we have to stop supporting dictators in the name of security and in the name of, especially now with the fall of the Soviet Union, in the name of fighting communism.
That's true. I mean, we don't have, like, the Soviet Union's been dead for 31 years.
Right, and yeah. one of the ironic features of Trump's fascism is his collusion with Putin, who is a fascist.
Yep, that's definitely is quite something. Yes, definitely. I mean, that's the thing, because we can be a country that really is an example of actually showing that power and the influence we've got and the role we've got doesn't just have to be about the strong or pushing around the weaker, but can actually be an attempt to build a country and a world of democracy and even dignity. We've had an amazing history and amazing current stuff trying to make that happen, but we can't do it and be friends with dictators and prop up dictators at the same time. It's just
right.
But yeah. One has to make a choice sometimes. Also quoting the prophets, what is it? Woe to those who say good is evil and evil is good. You can't be like, I normally like good, but this evil is really helping my security, so I think I'll support it. And it's not how it works.
That's very Orwellian, in terms of people who I would suggest that current students read. I would say read as much George Orwell as you can, because he talked about how fascists distort language and make it seem as if war is peace. But we know that war is not peace. War is war.
That is true. It's definitely, I would definitely second that. Read a lot of George Orwell. I'll put that in the description too. Let's see. What are the greatest parts of our history which you've been part of and witnessed, and what can we learn from them?
Wow. Well, I think, as I've alluded to, I would say that it's been very gratifying for me to have been part of second wave feminism in the 1970s. It was illuminating for me around that same time to evolve into being both an anti-racist Jewish feminist and democratic socialist. To the extent that I could, I supported the movement for LGBTQ liberation, mainly based in New York City. I support J Street and its efforts to end the occupation through a confederation model, which I see as bringing together the best of both a two-state and one-state model so that we eventually create two closely aligned, viable, ecologically sustainable cooperative states, the state of Palestine and the state of Israel.
Yes. Excellent.
And I see this as a lifelong project. You know, we're not as a point, we're certainly not at a point in this country where we can say, okay, we're finished working against systemic racism, or okay, we're finished working against misogynoir and misogyny, or okay, I'm tired, it's painful, so I'm not going to do my part as an American Jew to help end the occupation and end systemic human rights abuses against Palestinians. You know, this brings me back to another question about what inspires me about being Jewish. And there was a rabbi named Rabbi Tarfon who lived thousands of years ago who said, "You are not required to complete the task, but neither may you desist from it." Another rabbi, a contemporary rabbi who I know, who was until recently the rabbi at my synagogue, once said that maybe God is like an ocean and we're all little drops in the ocean. So in terms of all of the great social movements for liberation that are ongoing in the United States and that have engaged me and that are so inspiring to me, relatively speaking, I'm a little drop in the ocean, but I'm not allowed to desist from that. I'm not allowed to say, I'm tired of being wet, right? Just because it's difficult, because Jewish ethics impels me to continue. And I would also say, philosophically speaking, I've been influenced by French existentialism. There's a word that they have, engagé. It means engaged. I think that to have a meaningful life is to have an engaged life, to be engaged with the great social issues of our time. You know, and that doesn't mean that we're going to do it perfectly, because none of us are perfect. I've made my share of mistakes, and that's why I have a lifelong learning perspective on all of this, because there will always be more for me to learn. But I always want to be engaged.
Thank you. That was amazing. Great. So good. What kind of relationship would you like to see between elders and youth? What can we learn from each other?
I'd like to see more of what we're doing now. More communication, more dialogue, more deep listening. Because one secret that I will share with your listeners who are younger than I am is you will be at my age faster than you think. It happened to me faster than I thought it would happen. It may seem to you now that it's a long time before you will be a few months before 70 years old, the way I am, but it will happen faster than you think. Life is precious and life is relatively short. So get the best that you can. If you are in college now, get the best out of your academic experience now, get the best out of whatever life has to offer you at whatever stage of life that you are in, because you'll be in my stage of life faster than you think.
Thank you. That was amazing. Thanks. Love that. You're a huge reader. Why is reading important, and what are your favorite books beyond the ones you've already mentioned, which sound
Wow.
I should read them?
This could also be the subject of an entire podcast in and of itself.
You should probably be a repeat guest.
But, you know, one of my favorite writers is James Baldwin. So right off the bat, I will say, read everything that you can by James Baldwin. And one of the things that he said was, I hope I'm remembering this exactly. If it's not exact, it's close. You think your pain and heartbreak makes you alone in the world, but then you read. And I know this part is a paraphrase because reading connects you to other people who are grappling with very similar issues. And reading is key to lifelong learning. I think I became a librarian by profession because I believe in lifelong learning. And I would not have the perspectives that I have now on fighting racism, on being a feminist, on ending the Israeli occupation, if I did not have access to the views of people who are a lot smarter than I am through their books. So, for example, there's a professor named Dov Waxman who wrote a book called The Israeli-Palestinian Conflict, Everything You Need to Know. You know, it's not everything, but it's close to everything. And I would recommend that book to someone who wants a good overview on how Israel got from its there in 1948 and slightly before that in the early or to mid 1900s with the Balfour Declaration to the mess that we're in now with the occupation. Another book by him that I would recommend that I'm almost finished reading now, I haven't finished it yet, is called Trouble in the Tribe, where he looks at all the arguments that Jews have with each other about Palestine and Israel, and how Jews on the left feel, and how Jews on the right feel, and how Jews on the center feel, and why it's sometimes so difficult for us to have discussions about these issues without yelling at each other.
And Dov Waxman's actually at UCLA, so I'm getting very excited now because I actually take classes with him and stuff. I love that. And also my UCLA pride is activated right now, which is always fun.
Right. Another book that I would recommend, because there are so many misunderstandings about intersectionality, including the idea that it isn't relevant to Jews, is a book by Professor Marla Brettschneider called Jewish Feminism and Intersectionality.
Let me pull that up. Sounds great.
If you Google it, you'll see the spelling of her name.
Perfect. Yes, Marla Brettschneider. Sounds excellent.
Yeah, another book that I would about Jewish feminism that I think is very important is Standing Again at Sinai, Judaism from a Feminist Perspective. That's by Judith Plaskow.
Oh, wow.
And she looks at three broad categories, God, Torah, and Israel. And she says, how do we reimagine those three key categories in Jewish thought from a feminist perspective? And another book that I would recommend within that spirit is by Professor Laura Levitt, Levitt. It's called Jews and Feminism, The Ambivalent Search for Home.
Sounds
and
good.
That book, in some respects, is in a kind of a complicated dialogue with Judith Plaskow. And I'd have to read it again to get to the specifics, but I really loved it.
Ah, excellent. Amazing.